Welcome to you all to this special edition of INNErchamber Connections. I'm delighted to have with me today my good friend and composer and creator, Merrick Norman. Welcome, Merrick.
Thank you, Andrew.
So, Merrick, this is a very exciting time. We are speaking about Ballycroy today, and as we do so, the actors have come together for rehearsals with yourself, the wonderful director, Marty Meriden, and choreographer Jane Johansson. We're about to add the instrumentalists on Sunday. We're about to transform Avondale United Church into a stage to tell this tale with some deft lighting and staging from Stephen Degenstein. It's an amazing time. The first time I heard about your new composition was, I believe, when we were walking, going for these walks, and walks are so good for the soul and for the mind and get the creative juices flowing. I think this is summer of 2021,
exactly
perhaps.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We're going around the river, and I'm hearing about Ballycroy, and I'm hearing that it's already largely taken shape. And perhaps during COVID, I'm not sure how far back the genesis of this came, but tell me, where did it all start and when did it all start?
Well, COVID did play a big part in the process of writing the piece, only because prior to COVID, I had been looking for quite a long time. In fact, for most of my career, for a really great ghost story to develop into a theater piece of some sort. So it was in my brain, and around the time that COVID hit, like most of us in the entertainment industry, I felt low. I had a couple of months where I didn't know what I was going to do personally, didn't know how this was going to impact on our industry. So I felt decidedly uncreative until one day when I was working at part-time at Fanfare Books, this wonderful store here in Stratford. And on the slow days in winter, I would pop around the store and I would stand in front of any of the stalls and close my eyes, put my hand out, and whatever spine I would touch, I would pull out from the stall. And this day I happened to pull out a little book called Ontario Ghost Towns. And the first chapter I opened up was Ballycroy. I'd never heard the word. I thought it was a beautiful, musical, kind of Celtic sort of word. And I was drawn to it. So I read about it. I found that it had a wonderful sort of glimpse into the paranormal world, and that appealed to me as a composer. And that's when I started. And it got me out of this funk, and I became more and more connected to the piece and more inspired by the story, by the characters. And Bob's your uncle.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you undertook a great deal of independent study, I guess, digging into Ballycroy, finding a little bit more, looking online. There were some resources, I guess, for you there.
I did. There is actually a fair amount to find about Ballycroy, and I was able to get a number of books that reference Ballycroy, but not a great deal of information, and very contradictory statements about years and names and circumstances revolving around the fire of Ballycroy. But my dear darling wife, Barbara, was flipping around online, and she found a wonderful article by a fellow named Brian Lockhart, who was writing for the Orangeville Citizen. And in 2014, Brian had written an article about Ballycroy, which is literally only 11 kilometers down the road from Orangeville. And it was so concise and comprehensive that it gave me everything that I really needed to form a basis of this theater piece, was around this particular article. And the article is called Chasing Ghosts. Right. And out of respect for Brian and gratitude for him giving me so much support and other information, I decided to call the prelude of the piece Chasing Ghosts.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Now tell me about the town of Ballycroy. So where is it? How old is it?
Well, Ballycroy, the community still exists. There is no town there anymore, and it was in the 19th century. For about 65 years, it was the fastest growing town outside of Toronto. It was a true boom town. It just exploded. And the reason that it did was at that particular time in the early 19th century, there was a huge influx of Irish that came to Canada looking for a future, land to develop, so many reasons that they came. And many came to escape the potato famine in Ireland.
Right.
But two brothers, the Beatty brothers, came and they found the Humber River, which is really was not developed at all at that time. But they decided, because they were sawyers in Ireland, that they would build a mill on the Humber River. And it was developed quickly and became hugely successful in a matter of months. And from that success, more and more people came to this area, built other mills of different types on the Humber River. And the town just blossomed, just exploded. And it grew and grew and grew and grew until about, I would say, till about 1860. And then it stayed pretty much the same. But it had hotels, it had general stores, post office, blacksmiths, racetrack, fairgrounds. It was a really going concern until the fire of April 29, 1875, and that's when it all just disappeared.
Shut down quickly thereafter.
Yeah.
So Irish immigrants, and there would be a mix of Protestant and Catholic
Yeah.
within the town.
Greater percentage of Irish Catholic, about 75%, 25% Protestant. And whenever that happens anywhere in the world, it's always loggerheads, constantly.
Right.
And that was the genesis of the problem in Ballycroy in 1875.
Now, I guess that there would have been a few property owners, largely corralling all of the business under their wings.
There were a great many establishments, and many of them were owned and operated by either dubious or nefarious types, but there were some very serious entrepreneurs, one in particular who was probably the most successful businessman in Ballycroy at the time. His name was Peter Small, and he built the post office, he built the racetrack, he built many individual establishments, including the Smalls Hotel, which was where the fire was really began, the fire there, and spread out, taking about 7 other establishments with it. But he was much admired by people for his success, but he was also reviled by other businessmen, and that was, again, part of the problem, because they believe, although this is a contentious issue, they believe the fire was intentionally set. And many of us, including myself, believe that that was the case. But it is contentious in that there was never any proof as to who it was that did set the fire.
Huh.
So it's a touchy subject, even to this day, 150 years later.
And to this day, there's now, there's a remaining general store, the building, and that's been converted.
It has.
And you've met the present owners, so I understand.
I did. The present owners are Mo Vikrant and El Patil.
Yes.
And they were kind enough to bring me into their house when I first visited Ballycroy. And from the outside, it looks like an older building that has been gussied up somewhat, but inside, they've restored it to exactly what it was 150 years ago. And it's absolutely fantastic. And I'm happy to say that Mo and El and Brian Lockhart, who wrote the article, will all be at the concert on November 5th, yeah.
That's going to be wonderful.
It will be, yeah.
Totally wonderful. So in that fire in 1875, 3 women died.
Yeah.
Mary Fanning, Margaret Daly, Bridget Burke. What's known about these women? Like I've seen a photo of a gravestone with all 3 of their names on the singular stone. What do we know?
Well, this is where I was drawn into this story. I was really captivated by this aspect, and these 3 lovely Irish immigrants. One was a professional milliner in Ireland before she came to Canada, and she met the 2 others in a small town called Colgan, which is only a few kilometers away from Ballycroy. And the 2 younger women wanted to apprentice with Mary Fanning, and she took them on and taught them how to make these hats. And they became quite successful in Colgan, and then were asked to come to Ballycroy by Peter Small, who wanted to develop the culture of Ballycroy. So he thought having a millinery shop would do the trick.
Wow.
So they came to Ballycroy, and that was the beginning of the end for them, sadly. But precious little, honestly, next to nothing is known about those 3 women, save for how old they were at the time of their passing, that they were milliners, they were devout Catholic, and that they were Irish. That's all that is known. And so their histories, I, with love and respect for each of them, basically invented, trying to maintain an integrity for all of them.
But you were able to establish that they did meet in Colgan, and that they did have this bond, this...
They did have a bond, we know that. Whether they met in Colgan or not is really down to me.
Yeah.
I've constructed this story out of the very little bits of information that I have.
But what I get a sense for is that within the story that you're telling, there's a great respect being given towards these three women who lost their lives, and it's part of a Canadian story, an important Canadian story. And that it's clear that was important to you to give reverence to their fate.
Well, it was important for me to draw the fact that Canada. There's a term that the Irish have always used called the far away. They dream of the far away, and for all three, in different respects, they came to Canada as heading towards some sort of nirvana or what they call Avalon in Ireland. So. It was important for me to draw the importance of why they came to Canada, and they wanted so much to be in this country. And I think that's the genesis of what really started to affect me in a deep, profound way, was that they came looking for something greater than what they had in Ireland, and it was snatched away from them by circumstance, and that's what I was impacted by that story.
So was it pretty much from the onset that you knew that you wanted to tell this story from their perspective, not the perspective of a store owner or an onlooker?
Well, yes, and this is a good place to mention that the piece was actually constructed as a theater piece. And in that theater piece, there will always only ever be three actors, women, who play those three characters, but they play all the other characters in town as well. So it's this concert that we're doing, I've had to scale down considerably. It's gone from about a 2.5-hour theater piece to a 90-minute concert. So I've taken out many of the scenes where the women play the other characters. But for all intents and purposes, they are the narrators of this story. But I would just say that the reason that this ghost story has developed over these years is over the course of time, there have been probably more than 50 people who have gone to Ballycroy to walk the property, to sort of feel the essence of paranormal around this area. And many of them wrote testimonials as to their experience in Ballycroy. And this is the reason that it's become sort of qualified as a bona fide ghost town. That in all of these testimonials, there's two aspects that remain the same, although none of these people knew each other. In each of the testimonials, they say, we smelled the scent of wood smoke, and we felt intense heat. And many people also have seen apparitions, and others have merely felt a presence of some sort. But those are always mentioned, wood smoke and intense heat. And that's why I think I was all of a sudden I felt, as soon as I read that in this little book, I felt a shiver go up my spine, and I thought, I think I found my story. I think I found my ghost story.
And you've been on the hunt for a ghost story for some time.
I have, for a long time, exactly.
When the feeling was right, I'm sure you definitely felt
I leapt on it, for sure.
Amazing. So I'm familiar with your musicals, Dracula, which we did an in-concert presentation of, and Wanderlust, which I saw, but then you were so kind so as to create a piano trio suite using themes from the music. So those would be called musicals. Is this a musical, or at this stage is it a musical play, or is it a play?
That's a great question. We're still, the piece is in its infancy, so we're still trying to sort of find exactly what it is. But at this stage, I would say it's a play with music, and it has a not operatic nature in the tone of the music, but it has an operatic style in the telling of the story, basically, if that makes sense. It has a grand sort of gravitas to it. It's an operatic in that sense.
Huh.
Yeah.
I got it. So instrumentation. How did you choose it? I mean, we've got,
Well,
you go.
I knew that I had to include a semblance of Celtic instruments, because that's so much a part of the characters. I mean, it's in their DNA. So I've included, penny whistles and bodhráns and rhythm bones and things of that sort. So there are peppered throughout moments where there is a sense of the Celtic instrument. But because we're in Canada for certainly the entire sweep of the piece, I wanted there to also be a grounded sense of a more global sound. So I tried to sort of expand the sound of the orchestra to include a greater color and richness than just a Celtic.
So the wind instruments, a couple of the string instruments beyond the fiddle. I guess that brings a little bit of a cinematic sweep to it, or an orchestral sound to it.
Thanks for bringing that up, because that's something that I love to do in all of my theater pieces, is I try to include a very cinematic approach to it, so that a lot of the scenes, my personal bent is to underscore them in a minimal way to make it feel like a living film, as opposed to a sort of a static, sometimes can be a very static theater piece. I like it to sort of feel like it flows. It just has a constant sense of movement or motion to the piece.
And is that the music that ties it together? Is that what you're focusing on? Is the connective tissue?
There's a good deal of text in this play, quite a lot, but much of it, I wouldn't say all of it, but much of it is underscored in a very kind of evocative way to support. The orchestra in its own sense becomes a bit of a character unto itself in that respect. And it has ghostly overtones and Celtic overtones as well. But it's very, if I can say this without sounding on PC, but it has a very feminine sound to it. It's very romantic and lyrical. So I've tried to celebrate that as much as possible, because it is 3 women characters.
Right. And so you yourself will be conducting and performing from the piano, from my mother's piano.
Yes, exactly. And it's a beautiful piano, by the way. Thank you. I appreciate it. And yes, I'll be conducting mostly you'll be seeing a lot of this going on.
It's amazing.
Because my hands are very busy. But trying my best to make the cues, as obvious as I possibly can.
You're so good at that.
But I have so much faith in this group. The orchestra is superb. You've put together a great team, and it's easy to just look sideways at somebody and they know exactly where their cue is. So it's not difficult for me.
And are you thinking of these particular players a little bit as you compose? Like I'm thinking of Graham, for instance.
And you, for that matter. Very much so. I'm used to the sound of each of our players, their style of playing, and it does inspire me to think of certain lines as color in orchestration, definitely. And certainly with Graham. I mean, Graham is the personification of percussion, and you can just think of anything, and Graham either has it or will get one and learn how to play it.
Yes.
So he's a godsend. He really is.
So how would you describe the music that's in the musical, just to give people a little bit of an oral representation or description of what they're going to hear?
Someone was saying when they heard, we did a demo tape for this, and someone had said, and I thought it was such a lovely and probably pretty apt comment about the style of music. They said, it seems bathed in Kelly green. And I thought that was just a really lovely way of saying that it feels like it was born in the Irish sensibility.
Yes.
And that meant a lot to me, actually. And I think maybe I wasn't as conscious of doing that until I heard somebody say that.
Right.
And I thought that was really lovely. It does have a very lyrical, almost folky kind of quality to it. Some of the melodies, I think, it's hard to sort of listen to your own music and categorize it, but I think it does have an echo of the old country. And I think that even though the 3 characters are decidedly different, very, very different characters, they all seem to have captured that little bit of Ireland in their individual songs and in their trios as well. And
for source material for yourself, did that really come out of your imagination for the music? or did you have to research and kind of dig and find little folk?
No,
folk
I was
threads?
actually pretty aware of the history of Celtic music, and I've used it in various projects over the years. So that was familiar to me, and I love it. So that was a very pleasurable thing to work with. But it's interesting how I'm not used to writing my own libretto. I have done it in the past, but I haven't done it in quite a while because I've been lucky enough to work with some fantastic collaborators. But as I wrote the play, the music started to come quicker and quicker to me. The characters became more vivid, and their individual motifs became stronger as I invented them in a more complex way. And I think the score is. Again, it's hard to speak about your own score because you're so close to it. It's hard to really say, but I think it's captured the women, and I think that the story is clear in the type of orchestration that I've used for it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So we are so fortunate to have Marty Meriden.
Oh my gosh.
Directing and guiding this performance along, and she did a beautiful job in our in concert performance of Dracula, and she's always been such a strong INNERchamber supporter. What an amazing woman and just creative personality. It's early days, right? Since she's inserted herself into the rehearsal process.
Yeah.
What has she brought already to this production?
Well, I'll just say quickly that our three actors, Barbara Barsky, Laura Conlon, and Regan Teal, along with our choreographer, Jane Johansson, they have brought so much already. But what Marty has done is she has sort of enveloped their ideas and she's distilled them all. But Marty has an uncanny way. I mean, Marty's career as an actor, as a director, and as a teacher is unparalleled in Canada. She's absolutely fantastic and she's a dream to work with. But she has this wonderful way of taking everybody's ideas and creating something completely unique out of all of it. But her insight into character, her fantastic dramaturgical sensibility as well is great. We're just fine-tuning it as we go along. Again, it's a very young piece, and it will go through many, many more changes before it actually hits the stage at some point. But I think this concert is going to be a great stepping stone for it to get its foot into the marshy pool so that we can go further and further and develop it more and more.
I'm delighted. I'm delighted that we're presenting this. This is going to be great.
I'm thrilled. It means a lot to me because
Yeah.
my years with INNERchamber were golden. I had fantastic 5 years. So the fact that we're presenting this piece that I'm very proud of with INNERchamber is just a blessing to me. The whole thing is an embarrassment of riches. It really is. It really is.
Very true. So this is Ballycroy. Ballycroy will be presented in person, in concert, and this is November the 5th at 7:30, live from Avondale United Church. It will also be live streamed. You can find more information at innerchamber.ca. Merrick, thank you again for this gift of this piece, for something for us all to work on and come together, and I'm really looking forward to this world premiere.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's great. Thanks so much.
Cheers.